Have you ever been so furious, so utterly betrayed, that your body shakes with a rage you didn't know you possessed? Because that's what it felt like when I realized my mother-in-law wasn't just being difficult, she was actively trying to destroy my life, piece by terrifying piece. And the man I loved? He kept finding excuses. I've been married to Marco for 4 incredible years. We met through mutual friends, dated, got engaged, the whole fairy tale. And I truly, deeply love him. He's a good man in so many ways. But his mother, Angela? From the very first moment she laid eyes on me, she hated me. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being dramatic. I watched it happen. Marco brought me to Sunday dinner for the first time, and I saw her face transform. 1 second, she was this warm, smiling woman greeting her son, and the next, she was looking at me like I was something she'd scraped off the bottom of her shoe. For years, Marco made endless excuses for her. She's protective. She's old-fashioned. She just needs time to warm up to you. She had a hard time when his dad left. She sacrificed everything for him. I've heard every single one. And I tried. Oh, how I tried. I brought her flowers. I helped clean up. I complimented her cooking, even when she deliberately made dishes I was allergic to. I smiled through every single comment about my weight, my clothes, my hair, the fact that I didn't go to church, my family, where I grew up. Literally everything about me was wrong in her eyes. But I kept going because I loved Marco, and I foolishly thought she'd eventually see I wasn't going anywhere and accept me. God, that was stupid. I know that now. The real nightmare began about 18 months ago. We were 2.5 years into our marriage, and I'd finally given up on Angela ever liking me. We'd reached this cold, fragile peace where she was civil to my face, and I stayed out of her way. Marco seemed relieved we weren't actively fighting, and honestly, that should have been my first clue that something was very, very wrong. Angela doesn't do peaceful coexistence. Angela does control. I started noticing it around September. This silver sedan. It was always parked on our street, different spots, but always in view of our house. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe new neighbors, a visitor? Our area is quiet, mostly young families and retirees. But then I started seeing it everywhere. In the grocery store parking lot. A few spaces down when I got my nails done with my sister, Emmy. Outside the restaurant when I met my college friend, Karina, for lunch. My stomach dropped a little lower each time. I told Marco, my voice shaking a little. He just said I was being paranoid. It's just a coincidence, he'd say. Columbus isn't that big. People's paths cross. And I wanted to believe him. The alternative was insane, right? Who would be following me? Why? Then one afternoon, I was at the farmer's market downtown, grabbing some produce. And there it was again. The silver sedan. Same car, same spot near the entrance. I was so sick of feeling crazy. So tired of Marco looking at me like I was losing it. So I walked right up to it. There was a guy inside, middle-aged, engrossed in his phone. When he saw me, he flinched. Startled. And in that instant I knew. I knew everything I needed to know. I knocked on his window. Hard. When he rolled it down, I just looked him dead in the eye and asked, "Why are you following me?" And you know what he did? He tried to drive away. He actually threw the car in reverse and started backing out while I was still standing there. I had to jump back to avoid getting run over. I got his license plate, but more importantly, I got a good, clear look at his face. Gray hair, late 40s, a bit heavyset, wearing a polo. My hands are shaking, but I managed to snap a quick picture of him through the back window as he sped off. It wasn't perfect, but his face was clear. That night, when Marco came home, I laid it all out. The picture, the description, every single time I'd seen that car. And his response? Have you been sleeping okay lately? Are you stressed about work? Maybe you should talk to someone about your anxiety. I lost it. Truly lost it. I am not crazy, Marco. I am not imagining things. A man has been following me for weeks, and your response is to suggest therapy? He tried to say he was just trying to help, that I was being aggressive, that this was exactly why his mother thought I was difficult to deal with. And that's when it clicked. A chilling realization. Why would he bring up his mother in the middle of me being stalked, unless she was somehow involved. My blood ran cold. I didn't say another word that night. I just waited. Let him think I'd dropped it. The next week, I called Emmy. We spent hours Googling Private Investigator Columbus, Ohio. On the third page of results, there he was. Robert Castellano, owner of Castellano Investigations. Same gray hair. Same heavy face. His website even bragged about discreet surveillance services for concerned family members. A private investigator. Someone had hired a PI to follow me. Emmy wanted to confront Marco right then, but I stopped her. I needed to know who hired him. If I accused Angela without proof, Marco would just defend her, like always. Nothing would change. I racked my brain for days. How could I prove Angela was behind this? I couldn't call the PI. I couldn't hack anything. Then it hit me. I didn't need proof before the confrontation. I needed the confrontation to be the proof. If I accused her in front of everyone and she denied it convincingly, fine. I'd look paranoid. But if she reacted with guilt, if she couldn't deny it, then everyone would see. Sunday came. I was ready. Marco's Aunt Elsa was there, his cousin Terry and Terry's wife. And, of course, Angela. We were all sitting around the dining room table, eating this pot roast Angela kept bragging about. I waited for my moment. It came when Angela made some snide comment about how nice it was that I'd finally learned to set the table properly, a passive-aggressive dig about something she'd criticized for years ago. I looked her right in the eye and asked, Angela, do you know a man named Robert Castellano? The entire table went silent. Marco looked confused. Terry's wife looked bewildered. But Angela? Angela's face went completely white. All the blood drained from it in a second. I didn't stop. I pulled out my phone, showed everyone the picture I'd taken at the farmer's market. Does anyone recognize him? Then I showed them his website. Private Investigator. Surveillance Specialist. I looked straight at Angela. How long have you been paying him to follow me? Angela started crying. Not her usual fake tears. These were real. She stammered. I was just trying to protect my son. I knew you were hiding something. A mother knows these things. She kept talking, kept defending herself, and then it slipped out. I had to be sure. 6 months isn't that long when you're trying to protect your child. 6 months. She said it herself. This man had been following me for 6 months. 6 months of my life where someone was watching my every move, documenting where I went, who I talked to, what I did. 6 months of feeling like I was going absolutely insane while my own husband told me I was paranoid. I knew this next part was cruel, and I didn't care. Angela's ex-husband cheated on her multiple times before leaving her for his secretary when Marco was in high school. It's why she's so paranoid about infidelity, why she's always been suspicious of me. 6 months of feeling like I was going crazy while my husband told me I was paranoid. I spat out, my voice cracking with emotion. Angela found nothing, because there was nothing to find. I've never cheated on Marco. I'm not you. I told everyone at that table exactly what Angela had done. Hired a PI. 6 months of surveillance. All because she wanted to find proof I was cheating so Marco would divorce me. Marco just sat there, mouth agape. Elsa asked what the hell was going on. Terry's wife looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Marco finally spoke, asking his mother if it was true. She couldn't even deny it. She just kept crying. I did it for him. Because I love him. Because I couldn't stand to see him hurt the way his father hurt me. I looked at Marco, my heart pounding. What are you going to do about this? I asked him. Your own mother had me stalked for half a year. That's not protective. That's not love. That's obsessive, controlling, and insane. And do you know what he said? He said she was just worried. That she didn't mean any harm. That she obviously went too far, but her heart was in the right place. I left. I just got up from that table and walked out. Emmy picked me up because I was shaking too hard to drive. Not from fear. From absolute, blinding rage. 6 months of being watched and followed, and my husband's response was that his mother meant well. That was in October. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it. That Marco saw reason. that Angela apologized, that we all moved past it. But of course, that didn't happen. What happened was Angela decided that if she couldn't catch me cheating, she would make evidence that I was. About 3 weeks after that dinner confrontation, Marco came home from work looking utterly devastated. He sat me down in the living room and told me his mother had sent him some photos. Photos that showed me with another man at a hotel looking very intimate. My stomach twisted. I asked to see them. He hesitated, then showed me. The photos were of me, all right. My face. My body. Clothes I recognized from my own closet. But the man I was supposedly with? I'd never seen him in my life. The hotel in the background? Never been there. And when I looked closely, really closely, I could see it. The shadows were wrong. The lighting didn't match. My face was just slightly off, an unnatural angle. They were photoshopped. Angela had taken photos of me, probably from her surveillance or my social media, and edited them to look like I was having an affair. I showed Marco, pointing out every inconsistency, every tell. Do you really think I'd be stupid enough to go to a hotel with another man in broad daylight, wearing recognizable clothes? Do you really think so little of me that you'd believe obviously manipulated photos from a woman who has already proven she would do anything to break us up? Marco sat there for a long time, his face blank. Then he said, I believe you. I can see now that the photos are fake. My mother, she's gone too far this time. I thought, okay, finally, he's seeing her for what she is. Then he said he was going to talk to her. Explain that what she did was wrong. Help her understand that she can't keep doing this. Talk to her like she was a child who needed a lesson, not a grown woman who had deliberately fabricated evidence to destroy her son's marriage. I told him talking wasn't good enough. She needed to apologize to me directly. She needed to admit what she'd done to the whole family, just like I'd been humiliated at that dinner table. And if she couldn't do that, then I wanted him to cut contact with her. Marco balked. I can't cut off my own mother. Yes, she's made mistakes, but she's still my mom. She's all the family I have left since his dad took off. You're asking too much. I reminded him. Your mother had me stalked for 6 months and then tried to frame me for cheating. When that didn't work. That's not mistakes, Marco. That's a campaign. I am your wife, and if you can't choose me over someone actively trying to destroy our marriage, then maybe we don't have a marriage worth saving. We fought about it for weeks. Marco kept trying to find some middle ground, some compromise where he could keep his mother in his life without me having to accept her behavior. He suggested therapy for Angela. Limited contact. He even suggested I was overreacting because I never had a complicated family, so I didn't understand. And through it all, Angela kept texting him, calling him, showing up at our house when I wasn't home, always playing the victim, always crying about how she was losing her son, how I was turning him against her. Never once did she apologize to me. Never once did she admit she was wrong. Thanksgiving was a disaster. I refused to go to Angela's. Marco went without me. Christmas I spent with Emmy and my parents while Marco split his time. By New Year's, I was seriously considering divorce. Then in February, something else happened. Something that made the PI and the fake photos look like child's play. I got a call at work from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was a woman identifying herself as being from Child Protective Services. She said they'd received a report about our household and needed to schedule a home visit. I asked what kind of report. She said they'd received an anonymous tip alleging child abuse and neglect. We don't have children, I told her, my voice shaking. We've been trying, actually, but we haven't been successful yet. She sounded confused. The report specifically mentioned a toddler in the home, gave details about unsafe conditions and suspected physical abuse. Someone had called CPS and filed a completely false report about children that don't even exist. I knew immediately who it was. There was only one person unhinged enough to do something like this. One person who would do literally anything to tear my marriage apart. I asked the woman from CPS if she could tell me anything about who filed the report. She said it was anonymous, but they still had to investigate all tips. Even though we didn't have kids, they had to send someone to verify, and closed the case. A week later, an investigator came to our house, looked around, confirmed there were no children living here, asked some questions about our situation. I had to explain everything: the stalking, the fake photos, the mother-in-law from hell. The investigator was sympathetic, but she just repeated they had to follow up on all reports. I filed a police report, not because I thought they'd do anything, but because I wanted documentation. The officer I spoke to said false CPS reports are illegal, but almost impossible to prove without a confession. They'd look into it, but I knew nothing would happen. This time, I didn't even tell Marco first. I confronted Angela directly. I just drove to her house and rang the doorbell. When she opened it, I asked her, "Are you proud of yourself? Does calling CPS with false reports make you feel powerful? Do you understand that filing false reports is a crime and that you could face consequences for it?" She denied it, of course. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe one of your neighbors had concerns." She told me I couldn't prove anything. Then she gave me this little smug smile that made me want to, well, you can imagine. I told her I was done, that I was going to do whatever it took to protect myself from her, that if she came near me again, if she tried anything else, I would make her regret it. She just looked at me and said I was the problem in Marco's life, that before me, he was happy and close to his family, and now she barely sees him, that I'd isolated him from everyone who loved him, that I was manipulative and controlling and she could see right through me, even if Marco couldn't. I literally laughed in her face. Because the projection was so utterly incredible, I couldn't even respond. This woman who had hired someone to stalk me was calling me controlling. I left and drove home and told Marco everything. The CPS call, the investigation, confronting his mother. And he had the nerve, the actual nerve, to say I shouldn't have gone over there alone. That I was escalating things. That now his mother was going to feel attacked, and it would be even harder to fix things between us. Fix what? I demanded. What exactly is left to fix? Your mother tried to prove I was cheating. When that failed, she tried to frame me. When that failed, she called CPS with false reports about children who don't exist. What is next, Marco? What will it take for you to finally see that this woman is dangerous? He said I was being dramatic. That dangerous was a strong word. That yes, his mother had made serious mistakes, but she wasn't dangerous. She was just a lonely woman who was afraid of losing her son. That was last month. We're still married. Marco is still in contact with his mother. And yesterday, I found a new scratch down the entire length of my car's driver's side door. This is the third time my car has been keyed since December. Always when it's parked at the house. Always when Marco is at work and I'm home alone. There are no security cameras on our street, so I can't prove who's doing it, but I know. I know it's her. I told Marco about the car. He said it was probably kids from the neighborhood. Suggested I park in the garage. Our garage is full of his stuff. There's no room for my car. I asked if we could clear it out. He said he'd get to it when he had time. So here I am, married to a man who refuses to protect me from his own mother, living in a house where my car gets vandalized regularly, dealing with a woman who has escalated from stalking to fake evidence to CPS reports and shows no signs of stopping. I don't know what to do anymore. I love Marco, but I'm starting to hate him, too. I hate that he can't see what's right in front of him. I hate that he always finds a way to excuse her. I hate that I've become this angry, bitter person who can't even enjoy my own marriage because I'm constantly waiting for the next attack. Emmy says I should leave. My parents say I should leave. Karina says I should at least talk to a lawyer. But every time I think about actually doing it, I remember the man I fell in love with. And I think maybe if I just try harder, explain better, he'll finally understand. But that's how I ended up here, isn't it? Trying harder, explaining better, and nothing changing. Things were tense after my last update. Marco and I were barely talking, except for necessities. He'd started sleeping on the couch some nights because every conversation turned into the same fight. Me saying his mother was terrorizing me, him saying I was being dramatic and refusing to see her side. We just went in circles until we were too exhausted. About a week later, I came home from errands, and our neighbor Julia was outside watering her plants. Julia and I have always been friendly, not best friends, but we'd chat. She'd bring over cookies at Christmas. Nice woman, maybe mid-50s. So I waved at her like always. And she just turned away. Didn't wave back. Didn't say hi. Just straight up turned her back and went inside. I stood there in my driveway, feeling like I'd been slapped. We'd had a conversation about her daughter's wedding just 2 weeks before. Now she was acting like I didn't exist. I told myself, maybe she's having a bad day. Not everything is about you. Then it happened again. Our other neighbor, Stephen, 2 houses down. I was getting the mail, and he was walking his dog. He crossed to the other side of the street when he saw me. Actually crossed the street to avoid walking past me. By the 3rd time it happened, with a woman from a few blocks over I sometimes saw, at the park, I knew something was going on. People don't just randomly start avoiding you for no reason. I asked Marco if he'd noticed anything weird with the neighbors. He said no, of course. Why would he? He's barely home during the day. I told him about Julia and Stephen and the woman from the park, and he did that thing he does where he sighs like I'm being exhausting. Maybe you're being too sensitive. Maybe you're looking for problems where there aren't any. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But I just walked away. I was so tired of having the same conversation where I tell him something is wrong, and he tells me I'm imagining it. Emmy came over that weekend, and I told her everything. She got this look on her face, the one she gets when she's about to do something that might be a bad idea, but she's going to do it anyway. She said she was going to talk to Julia. I told her not to. It'll be weird. Just let it go. She completely ignored me and marched right over to Julia's house. I watched from my living room window like a creep. They talked for maybe 10 minutes. I couldn't hear anything, obviously, but I could see Emmy's body language getting more and more tense. When she came back, she looked ready to commit murder. Angela had been talking to the neighbors. Not just talking. Spreading stories. According to Julia, Angela had been coming around the neighborhood for weeks, telling anyone who would listen that I was unstable, that I'd been having affairs, that I was trying to take Marco for everything he had in a divorce, that I'd threatened her, and she was afraid for her safety. Julia told Emmy she didn't want to get involved, but she thought I should know what was being said. And oh, by the way, Angela had mentioned that I had substance abuse problems, and that's why Marco's family was so worried about me. Substance abuse. I don't even drink more than a glass of wine at dinner sometimes. I've never done drugs in my life. But now my entire neighborhood thinks I'm some kind of addict, cheater, who threatens old women. I waited for Marco to get home. Sat in the living room with the lights off, just waiting. When he walked in and turned on the light and saw me, he actually jumped. What the hell are you doing sitting in the dark? I told him. About the neighbors. About what Angela had been telling them. About the substance abuse lie and the affair lies and the threats lie. I told him his mother had been conducting a whisper campaign against me in our own neighborhood. The place where we live, where we're supposed to feel safe. And, you know what Marco said? You know what his response was to finding out his mother had been destroying my reputation to everyone we live near? He said, maybe she was just venting. That she'd been upset about how you confronted her, and maybe she'd exaggerated to some people, and it got out of hand. He would talk to her about it. She told people I'm a drug addict, and he called it venting. I lost it. I completely lost it. I told him I was done with his excuses. Done with him minimizing everything she did. Done with him choosing her over me, again and again and again. I told him his mother was not just protective. She was not just worried. She was malicious. She wanted to destroy me, and he was letting her do it. Marco got angry then. He started saying that I didn't understand what it was like growing up with just his mom. How hard she worked to give him everything. How much she sacrificed. He said his dad abandoned them when he was 15, and his mom was all he had for years. And I couldn't just expect him to throw her away like she meant nothing. I told him, I'm not asking you to throw her away. I'm asking you to protect me, your wife, the woman you promised to love and cherish and all that. I'm asking you to set one boundary with her, just one. And you can't even do that. He said, you don't make it easy. Every time you talk about his mother, it's with so much hatred and anger that it puts him on the defensive. Maybe if you tried to understand her perspective instead of just attacking her all the time, he could be more supportive." "What perspective am I supposed to understand?" I screamed. "The perspective of hiring a PI to stalk me? The perspective of photoshopping pictures to frame me for cheating? The perspective of filing false CPS reports?" He just stood there, jaw clenched, looking at the floor. I told him I wanted him to go to her house right then, that night, and tell her that if she ever spoke to another neighbor about me, if she ever said my name to anyone in this neighborhood again, there would be consequences. Real consequences. He asked what kind. I said I didn't know yet, but I was done being her punching bag, and if he wouldn't defend me, I would defend myself. He went. I don't know what they talked about because he didn't tell me and I didn't ask. He came back 2 hours later, looking drained, and said it was handled. That his mother understood she'd gone too far with the neighbor stuff, and she would stop. I didn't believe him, but I was too tired to fight anymore that night. Things were quiet for maybe a week. Then Emmy called me. She asked if I was sitting down. I just told her to tell me whatever it was. She'd run into Elsa, Marco's aunt, at a Kroger. They talked for almost an hour, and Elsa had told her some things about Angela that I'd never heard before. When Marco was in college, he dated a girl for almost 2 years, pretty serious, even talking about getting engaged. And Angela had hated her, just like she hated me. And she'd done things to try to break them up, too. Not as extreme as what she'd done to me, but a similar playbook, showing up unannounced, making comments about the girlfriend's family, telling Marco she had a bad feeling about her. They broke up eventually. Marco told everyone it was mutual, they'd grown apart. But according to Elsa, the real reason was that Angela had convinced Marco his girlfriend was only with him for money, that she'd overheard the girlfriend talking about Marco's future earning potential. Marco confronted the girlfriend. She denied it. He believed his mother anyway. Elsa said she'd always felt guilty about not saying something at the time. She'd seen what Angela was doing, but she didn't want to get in the middle of family drama. She'd thought about reaching out to me several times after the dinner confrontation, but Angela was her sister, and she didn't know how to navigate it. I didn't tell Marco what Elsa said. I don't know why. Maybe because I knew he would just get defensive, or make excuses, or find some way to explain it away. Or maybe because I was starting to realize that no amount of evidence was ever going to change how he saw his mother. The next incident happened at a gas station, of all places. I was filling up my car when this woman I'd never seen before walked up to me and asked if I was Marco's wife. When I said yes, she said she was Angela's friend from church, and she just wanted me to know that she was praying for me. I asked her what she meant. She said Angela had told her everything about my problems, about how I'd been struggling, about how Angela was trying so hard to help me, but I kept pushing her away. She said addiction was a disease, and there was no shame in getting help. I stood there at the gas pump while this stranger told me about my supposed addiction and Angela's supposed efforts to help me. I couldn't even respond. The woman patted my arm sympathetically and walked off. I finished pumping my gas, got in my car, and just sat there for 20 minutes. Angela wasn't just telling the neighbors. She was telling her church, her friends, God knows who else. Building this narrative where she was the concerned mother-in-law trying to help her troubled daughter-in-law, painting herself as the victim of my aggression while assassinating my character to anyone who would listen. I drove straight to Angela's house. I know I probably shouldn't have. I know it would just give her more ammunition to claim I was harassing her, but I was beyond caring about strategy at that point. She answered the door, surprised to see me. I didn't wait for her to say anything. I walked right past her into her living room, turned around and asked her, "What exactly are you trying to accomplish?" She started with the innocent act. "What are you talking about?" "I have no idea what you mean. You really need to calm down." I told her about the woman at the gas station, about the prayer offer, about the addiction story being spread at her church now. She told me she hadn't said anything that wasn't true, that I was clearly struggling. Anyone could see that my behavior lately had been erratic and aggressive. And Marco was worried about me, even if he wouldn't admit it. I asked her if she actually believed that, or if she was just that committed to the lie. She said it wasn't a lie. She said I had isolated Marco from his family, that he barely called her anymore, that he'd missed 3 Sunday dinners in a row. She said before me, he was such a good son, so attentive, so loving. And now she was lucky if she got a text from him once a week. I told her that wasn't isolation. That was her son being married and having his own life, and maybe not wanting to spend every Sunday watching his mother criticize his wife. She laughed. A cold, hard laugh. "You really think you're special, don't you?" she sneered. She said she'd seen girls like me before, girls who swoop in and try to steal sons from their mothers. She said I might have Marco fooled for now, but eventually he would see me for what I really was. Asked what I really was according to her. She said I was a manipulator, a liar, that I trapped Marco into marrying me, and now I was trying to cut off everyone who could show him the truth. She even tried to spin the fake photos, saying she hadn't made them. She'd received them from someone who cared about Marco and was trying to help him see. She didn't know who took them, but she believed they were real. I couldn't even argue anymore. I realized I was dealing with someone who had constructed an entire alternative reality in her head, where she was the good guy and I was the villain. She genuinely believed, or at least had convinced herself she believed, that I was this terrible person doing terrible things to her precious son. I told her to stay away from me. Stay away from my house. Stay away from my car. Stay away from my neighbors and her church friends and anyone else she might want to spread her lies to. I told her if she didn't stop, I would explore every legal option available to me. I left. There was nothing else to say. When I got home, Marco was there. He'd gotten off work early. He took one look at my face and asked where I'd been. I told him all of it. Marco sat down on the couch and put his head in his hands. He stayed like that for a long time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. He said he was tired, that he felt like he was being torn in half, that he loved me and he loved his mother, and every day felt like he was failing both of us. He said he didn't know what to do anymore, that every choice felt wrong. He just wanted everyone to get along, and he knew that was impossible, but he didn't know how else to think about it. For a second, just 1 second, I felt sorry for him. He did look utterly exhausted, beaten down, like a man who genuinely didn't know which way to turn. But the feeling passed. I told Marco, "This isn't about getting along. This is about your mother actively trying to destroy me and you standing by and watching it happen. I'm not asking you to hate her or never see her again. I'm asking you to tell her, clearly, that there will be consequences if she doesn't stop. Real consequences. Not another talk. Not another, 'Please, Mom, try to be nicer.' Actual consequences." He asked what that would even look like. I said I didn't know, but we needed to figure it out together. Because I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for the next attack, wondering what she was saying about me now and to whom. My mental health was suffering. My ability to trust anyone was suffering. My marriage was suffering. He said okay. He said he heard me. He said we would figure something out. I wanted to believe him. I really did. 2 days later was the incident that finally pushed me over the edge. The thing that made me realize talking and hoping and waiting wasn't going to cut it anymore. I came home from Emmy's house to find Angela standing in my driveway. Just standing there, waiting. My car was in the street because Marco still hadn't cleared the garage, and she was standing right in the middle of the driveway, blocking me from pulling in. I parked on the street and got out. Asked her what she was doing. She said she wanted to talk, woman to woman, without Marco in the middle. She said she'd been thinking about what I said at her house, and she realized we needed to clear the air. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to go inside and lock the door. But part of me thought, maybe this was it. Maybe she'd finally realized how far she'd gone. Maybe there was actually going to be a conversation that ended in something other than her playing the victim. We stood in the driveway. She didn't want to come inside, and honestly, I didn't want her in my house either. She started by saying she knew things had gotten out of hand, that she'd done some things she regretted, that she never meant to hurt me. She was just trying to protect her son. I waited for the but, because with Angela, there was always a but. The but came. She said, But I had to understand where she was coming from. That I'd come into Marco's life and changed everything. That he used to call her every day, and now she was lucky to hear from him once a week. That he used to come to Sunday dinner every single week, and now it was maybe twice a month. That she used to be the most important woman in his life, and now she felt like she'd been replaced. I told her, that's what happens when someone gets married. Marco is building a life with me. And yes, that means things with you would change. That doesn't make me the enemy. She shook her head like I wasn't getting it. She said I didn't understand because I'd never lost everything. She said, when Marco's father left, she had nothing. No money, no support, just a teenage son and a bunch of debt, and everyone telling her she should have seen it coming. She said Marco was all she had. He was the only good thing in her life. And watching him slip away was like losing his father all over again. For a moment, just one brief moment, I saw her as something other than a monster. I saw a woman who'd been abandoned and betrayed, who had poured everything into her son because he was the only safe place she had. A woman who was terrified of being alone again. But that moment passed quickly because trauma doesn't excuse terrorizing innocent people. Lots of people go through awful things and don't turn into stalkers who fabricate evidence and file false reports. I told her I was sorry for what she went through with Marco's father. I genuinely was. But that doesn't give you the right to treat me this way. I'm not taking Marco from you. I'm just trying to be his wife. There's room for both of us in his life, if you could just accept that. She got quiet. Then she said something that I think about every day now. She said, there wasn't room. The wife always wins. The mother always loses. She'd watched it happen with her own mother-in-law, who'd pushed her out of Marco's father's life. And look how that marriage ended. She wasn't going to let that happen to her son. I told her I wasn't her mother-in-law, that our situations were completely different, that I had never tried to push her out. She was the one creating conflict where there didn't need to be any. She looked at me with these cold, hard eyes and said I was lying to myself, that I knew exactly what I was doing, that maybe I'd even convinced myself I was innocent, but she could see the truth. That's when I realized there was no reaching her. No conversation was going to change her mind. She had decided I was her enemy years ago, and nothing I said or did would ever change that. I could be the perfect daughter-in-law for the next 50 years, and she would still see me as the woman who stole her son. I told her to leave. She asked if that was a threat. No, I said, my voice flat. It's a request. Please get off my property. She said she wasn't going anywhere until she said what she came to say. And then she told me that she was going to make sure Marco knew exactly who I was. That she would never stop. That she would do whatever it took to save her son from me. That I might have one for now, but she had patience, and she would be there long after I was gone. I walked past her into my house and locked the door. I watched through the window as she stood in my driveway for another 5 minutes, just staring at my house, before she finally got in her car and left. That night, I told Marco we needed to take serious action. Not another conversation. Not another chance. His mother had come to my house and told me to my face that she would never stop trying to break us up. This wasn't going to end with talking. For the first time ever, Marco didn't argue with me. He just nodded and said, okay, whatever you want to do. I'm with you. I'm meeting with a lawyer next week to discuss my options. Restraining order, harassment charges, whatever might actually have teeth. Emmy is coming with me because I don't trust myself to remember everything. So, this is going to be my last update because things finally came to a head and I have an actual ending to share now. The lawyer meeting happened. Emmy came with me, just like she promised. The attorney was actually more optimistic than I expected. She said with the evidence I had, witnesses from the dinner who heard Angela admit to hiring the PI, the police report from the false CPS call, Julia and potentially other neighbors who could testify about Angela spreading lies about me being a drug addict, a civil harassment restraining order in Ohio was very doable. But then she got real with me. She said Angela would absolutely fight it. That meant depositions, court appearances, potentially months of legal back and forth. Everything would become public record. Angela would hire her own attorney who would try to paint me as the aggressor, The unstable daughter-in-law tearing a family apart. She asked me point-blank if my marriage could survive that kind of pressure. If Marco would stand by me while I took his mother to court. I didn't have an answer for her. She told me to think about it. Said the legal path was there if I wanted it, but I needed to be prepared for what it would cost me beyond just money. Emmy squeezed my hand, and we left. When I got home, Marco was waiting for me. He'd taken the afternoon off work because he wanted to hear what the lawyer said. I told him everything, including the part about whether our marriage could handle me pursuing legal action against his mother. Then he said something that surprised me. He said he'd been doing a lot of thinking since Angela showed up at our house that day in the driveway. About what kind of man he wanted to be. About what his marriage vows actually meant. About whether he could keep living with himself if he let this continue. I waited, my heart hammering, because I'd heard versions of this before, and they never led anywhere. But then he said he'd called his mother that morning. Told her he needed to see her, that it was important. He asked if I would come with him. Not to confront her. Not to fight. Just to be there while he said what he needed to say. I almost said no. The last thing I wanted was to be in a room with Angela again. But something in Marco's voice made me think this time might actually be different. We drove to Angela's house together. She opened the door, surprised to see both of us. Marco didn't wait for her to invite us in. He just walked into her living room and sat down on her couch, and I sat next to him. Angela stood there, looking between us, trying to figure out what was happening. She asked what this was about, and Marco told her to sit down. She sat. And then Marco started talking. He told her he loved her, that he would always love her, that she was his mother, and nothing would ever change that. But he also told her that what she'd been doing to me was wrong. Not misguided. Not overprotective. Not excessive. Just wrong. He said he'd been making excuses for her for years because it was easier than facing the truth, but he couldn't do it anymore. Angela tried to interrupt, tried to defend herself, tried to turn it around on me. But Marco just kept going. He told her about the sleepless nights and the fights and watching me become a shell of the person he married. He told her she wasn't protecting him, she was destroying him. That every time she attacked me, she was attacking his marriage and his happiness and his future. Angela started crying then, the real tears this time, not the manipulative ones. She kept saying she just didn't want to lose him, that I didn't understand what it was like to be alone, that she was scared. Marco told her he understood she was scared. He understood she'd been hurt. But her fear didn't give her the right to hurt innocent people. He told her we had just come from a lawyer, and that I had enough evidence to get a restraining order against her. That witnesses had heard her confess. That the police report existed. That neighbors could testify. He said I was choosing not to pursue it right now, but that choice could change if she didn't stop. Angela looked at me with so much hatred I could feel it radiating off her. She told Marco I'd manipulated him into this. That I turned him against his own mother. That one day he would wake up and realize she was right about me. Marco stood up. He told her that was exactly the problem. That she couldn't even hear criticism without blaming me. That she was so convinced I was the enemy that she couldn't see how her own behavior had pushed him away. He told her she had a choice. She could work on herself, maybe see a therapist, learn to let go of some of the fear and anger, or she could keep doing what she'd been doing and watch her relationship with her son disappear, while also dealing with legal consequences. He said he hoped she would choose the first option, but the choice was hers. Then he took my hand, and we left. Angela didn't chase after us. She didn't call or text that night. For the first time in almost 2 years, I fell asleep without dreading what she might do next. That was 3 weeks ago. Angela has reached out a few times since then. Short text to Marco, asking if they can talk. He's responded but kept it brief. Said he meant what he said, and the ball is in her court.
She hasn't apologized to me.
I don't think she ever will. But she also hasn't keyed my car or talked to the neighbors or shown up unannounced or done any of the other things she used to do. Maybe she's just regrouping. Maybe she's planning something worse. But for now, there's quiet, and I still have the lawyer's number if I need it. Julia from next door even knocked on my door last week to apologize for believing Angela's lies and avoiding me. I don't know what the future holds with Angela. I don't trust her, and I probably never will. But I finally have a husband who's willing to put our marriage first, even if it took him way too long to get there. What do you all think? Have any of you faced a mother-in-law like Angela? How did you handle it? Or how would you have handled this? Let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your stories.